Ukraine continues its successful strike campaign against Russian strategic targets deep in the Russian rear, while the Russians themselves are advancing bit by bit, slowly but steady along the front lines. This is happening while the Ukrainians are reorganizing their whole army into corps structure, while still suffering from a shortage of infantry. But we'll talk about this as well as about anything else that has happened along the front lines and behind them in this situation report about the war in Ukraine. Surfshark VPN is sponsoring this channel for this month. If you want to bypass geo-blocking or hide your internet activity all with a convenient app, then use Surfshark VPN for just $2.09 a month. By using my link, you get 4 months extra as well. Thank you, Surfshark, for sponsoring this channel. Ukraine continues to hit Russian refineries and gas installations. Here we have different videos showing hits and fire burning. And finally, we have films, satellite pictures they show fire on the ground showing hits at various points. So the Ukrainians continue to strike successfully Russian targets, Russian hydrocarbon targets in the Russian rear. The effect will not be immediate, but it will obviously compound throughout the time. The Russians themselves continue heavy strikes inside of Ukraine. Basically daily civilian victims are being reported, usually a fair number of deaths with a lot of civilians being wounded. Last week, the Russians struck Ukraine with 50 missiles and cruise missiles, 660 strike drones like the Shahid, and more than 760 gliding bombs as well. We'll switch to the developments along the front line, and we start at Kursk. Here, the Ukrainians are reporting that in a boarding school in Sucha, the 84 Russian civilians were housed for evacuation into the Russian territory when the Russians bombed the facility, probably due to a strike, due to a gliding bomb. The 84 Russian civilians apparently became a victim. I have not seen a confirmation that all of them are dead, but they were in the building together with 4 Ukrainian policemen. This is happening while before a Ukrainian military spokesperson said that the Russians are increasing gliding bomb attacks inside of Kursk, and obviously the Russian propaganda has said that this strike on the boarding school was by the Ukrainians, that they struck their own territory to kill Russian civilians, which, to be frank, sounds like complete nonsense. But nevertheless, this is what happened here, and I cannot see any territorial change on the ground at the same time. So we switch to Kharkiv region, and here it's the same. Fighting is obviously continuing, but I do not see that anything has changed. We'll switch to the Eastern Front, and here we have some changes. Here close to Makivka, the Russians have recently advanced. We see them here to the west of the town, and on the map this is at... You can see the forested areas here, so it means the Russians have advanced roughly until here, so probably at least this here should now be in the contested zone. The Russians also advanced somewhat south. They managed to advance from Ivanivka further to the west. We have a geolocation of this as well. They are right north of Kolodyazi by now, so roughly to this point the Russians have advanced. In this event, a Russian soldier was struck with an FPV drone and later took his own life. So it shows the Russians are continuing trying to advance west of Ivanivsk. That's it north of the Seversky Donetsk. We switch to the south of it, and here we actually do have change close to Seversk for the first time in a fairly long time. We have a geolocation here that shows that Russians are here and here along the forested areas southeast of Seversk, east of Seversk, in that region, basically directly on the oblast border, and it shows that the Russians have reached this point and this point. Where exactly the new front line is obviously can't automatically be set from this, but it's probably like this at this point. This shows the Russians managed to advance somewhat closer to Seversk and from the south closer to Bilohorivka. We'll switch further south, and I actually do not have a confirmed change in Chasiv Yar, so we go directly to Toretsk. Here in Toretsk we have fresh geolocations again. This shows us that the Ukrainian soldiers have fought with Russians on the very outermost houses. This could have been a raid by the Ukrainians. I do not see this as a permanent confirmation that the Ukrainians have occupied this territory, but we see at least temporary presence of the Ukrainians at the very north of Toretsk. At this point here, roughly, we see that the Ukrainians still advance in this direction, still strike in this direction, and now and then at least have a presence. At the same time, the Ukrainian soldiers were also fighting in Shcherbinivka and were taking prisoners of war, and they were taking them down south here, indicating that Ukrainians are also operating here. We have seen Russians all over the place, roughly up to here and here in the past, over here in these areas, but it shows that it seems all of the southern Shcherbinivka is more or less a gray zone, a contested area. As of now, in this video, we have Ukrainian presence further south. We'll switch to the area of Pokrovsk, and here we have the Russians north of Kotline. Here they have advanced. We have geolocation again here in the tree line. We've seen them there a couple of days ago. Now they are back at this tree line here, which should be roughly at this point. They also managed to advance along the railroad in this direction here. We have a geolocation of this as well. So they managed to slowly creep closer towards Pokrovsk. This is the tree lines along the railroad, and this is an area where they usually have been somewhat successful in advancing in this region in the past. We remember here the area of Selidove, which was bypassed by using exactly these trees along the railroad line further south to then force a turning maneuver and to achieve a turning maneuver and force the Ukrainians to withdraw. We have further geolocations, and they are to the south. The Russians are in Nadezhdinka, which is down here. We have a geolocation of this, with them here being in the northern part of it, and they have also advanced south of it. We see that here in the tree line, the Russians managed to creep somewhat further west. This is already here on the map. It should be roughly until this point, those two. So we see additional Russian gains here. The Russians also, in the Kurakhove region, the Russians also had additional success inside of Andrivka. Geolocation shows us here that in the eastern part they are inside the houses, so they have reached more or less this area here and are increasing their pressure on Andrivka. They also gained additional ground in the north of Dachne. They have occupied most of the northern part, most of Dachne that is north of the road, and managed to increase their foothold roughly by this area here, where the last Ukrainian positions are likely only in those houses left. Further to the southwest at Rozlyv, I think. Here the Russians have advanced at this point. We have a geolocation of this as well, that the Russians managed to advance here as well. That was it with territorial changes. I do not see anything close to Velika Novosilka or in the Orikhiv region. So while fighting is being reported from these areas, I do not see that anything has changed. The bigger news over the last few days was this article here, where the Ukrainian Commander-in-Chief, General Syrskyi, said that Ukraine is changing to a core system. You can pause it here in case you want the background, how the structure was in the past. But basically, a core is usually 2 to 5 divisions, but not directly brigades. So how they are going to organize it without first creating divisions isn't clear. The division itself is usually made out of 2 to 4 brigades. So theoretically, each corps could house 4 to 20 brigades in each corps. We'll have to see whether this is going to be created like this. The overall idea behind this is obviously structural and better organization, but what exactly the Ukrainians aim to achieve in this, I cannot say. Ukraine very likely managed to kill a turncoat. It's a former Ukrainian citizen who joined sides with the Russians. He was killed in a bomb attack in Moscow. There are reports now that he has survived, though, even though initially it was reported he was killed. According to those claims, he's still alive, but in a coma and has lost a leg. So far, it's unconfirmed. I do not know what exactly happened to him now, but it seems to be clear that he was hit and that he was hit very hard. We'll talk about troop generation by the Russians, troop situation. Here we have a Russian mill blogger complaining about the vulnerability of their own IFVs and APCs. As he mentions here, as you can see, he mentions the BMPs, the BMDs, and the wheeled APCs. Those would be the BTR series. That they offer very little protection, sometimes not even against small arms, and that when they get defeated, that they usually blow up and lose a lot of lives. The issue is consistent, and he's complaining that all those widely proclaimed new IFVs have not appeared. But I guess you could argue that those who drive in BMPs, BMDs, and the wheeled APCs are still better off than what we can see here. This was an assault just done, as you can see here, with basically off-road vehicles that were used for assaults, completely unarmored, with the infantry sitting on top without any protection whatsoever. Ukraine, on the other hand, has trouble too. We have now here an article. Rob Lee took some segments out of it, but basically it continues to say that the problems are remaining, that a lot of people are deserting, that the pressure is just too high for them. Apparently, Ukraine's prosecution of deserters is wholly inadequate, that people are capable of disappearing without being held accountable. This is an issue, and Ukraine at the same time tries to make up for this apparently continuously by using Air Force personnel and sending them to the infantry. According to the reports here, personnel from Patriot batteries would be sent, and another report says it's personnel from IRIS-T. Obviously, there's a huge difference who is being sent there. I've said it in the past, whether you send the cook or the guard, or whether you send the technician that is responsible for maintenance and for laying fires or something like this, is a completely different story. We do not have the details here who exactly was sent, but at the same time, the issue is obvious, and the situation, the stress the Ukrainians are under to be forced to taking such measures is more than obvious as well. In the political sphere, we have some news as well. The Russian abduction of Ukrainian children is continuing. Ukraine has now published that by now 20,000 children were abducted since 2022. Since the full-blown invasion, only 1,189 were returned to the Ukrainians. This was happening while at the same time the special envoy from the US president, Kellogg, the former general, has said that the US wished for Ukraine to do elections in the near future. This is not allowed by the Ukrainian constitution while at war. By the way, in Germany, it's the exact same thing. And as far as I know, the Great Britain didn't hold elections during World War II either. But this was now apparently asked for by the special envoy Kellogg, and there's a report here that according to that, the former President Poroshenko, who would be a likely candidate against Zelensky, said that elections inside of a war would only cause division and would only help Putin. So even a potential contender, a potential rival of Zelensky, says that elections now would be suicide and would be a very bad choice. But that was it from me for today. If you like this situation report, please give it a thumbs up. It helps with the algorithm. Leave a comment if you have something to add, and if you're new here, I would like to invite you to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon so you don't miss future videos. This channel is only possible because of the support of viewers like you. If you like to support the channel, you can do so by the means in the description. But that's it from me for now. Thank you for watching, and I'll be back.